Show me your world, Chris.
Well, I thought we'd start with Crouch Tram Museum.
Great.
Dear Mum, Yorkshire is lovely, not like you said at all. They can smile, and they do sell my pasta sauce. The caravan bed is quite short, but Chris is a sensitive lover. Hope you can be happy for me. Love, Tina.
Yeah, good girl.
You are going to pick that up.
I didn't do that.
If you don't pick up this excrement immediately, then I'm going to have to inform the National Trust.
Report that to the National Trust, mate.
I don't want this to ruin our holiday.
Get in.
Never thought about murdering innocent people before.
He's not a person, Tina. He's a Daily Mail reader. Say one word and it's...
I get it, it's just thinking outside the box.
The police are pursuing a ginger-faced man and an angry woman.
Sit!
A little bit of housekeeping before we start. As you may know, we are streaming some of these sessions, including this one, live on YouTube. So if you want to watch it back afterwards, you just go to youtube.com/Eurogamer and there'll be an archived version. So yeah, without further ado, allow me to introduce you to our speaker. This is David Footman from Ubisoft. He's going to be showing you Splinter Cell Blacklist.
Hi there. My name is David Footman, and I'm the Cinematic Director at Ubisoft Toronto. And something you may not know is that in development teams, acronyms are used all over the place. Kind of like CIA stands for the Central Intelligence Agency. My first week on the job, somebody informed me that I was actually the FMV director on the project, which I later found out meant Full Motion Video Director. On the next project, I was told that I was the NIS director, which stands for Non-Interactive Sequences. I've also been called an in-game cinematic director, and more recently, a scripted event director. But what it means to be a cinematic director in a video game is I take the narrative and I work with the development team and I create a game story. And from that, I work with a screenplay writer to create scenes in the game. And then I work with a narrative designer to get story throughout gameplay at all the different channels of story and game. I work with a performance capture crew, actors and producers to create a PCAP shoot where we get all of our assets. And I work with an animation team to turn all those assets into animations in the game. which becomes cinematics. From there, I work with LDs, ADs, CDs, and GDPs to try to get everything working in game, which is kind of like standing on your head. Before I got into the games industry, I worked as an assistant director in the film industry for 12 years. I was a PA on X-Files. I was a third assistant director on Little Women with Christian Bale and Kirsten Dunst. I was a third assistant director on The 13th Warrior with Antonio Banderas, and a second assistant director on Mission to Mars. In the beginning, it was mostly fetching coffee and walking actors to set. But gradually, as I got closer to becoming a first assistant director, I started learning about how we make films, and I started meeting a lot of different directors and learned a lot about technique, production. But it was actually quite disappointing for me to learn that the closer I got to being a first assistant director, the further I actually went away from being a director. It's just how it works in the film industry. The two don't really connect that well. So I bought an edit suite and a camera, and I started working on independent films between every picture I worked on. The last big budget movie I worked on was Day After Tomorrow. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Roland Emmerich. He does a lot of disaster movies, lots of special effects, lots of explosions. We shot in Montreal, New York, Los Angeles, Dallas, and Mexico. The filming went on for 8 months. I was working 6 days a week, 15 hours a day, 2 cell phones. And to be honest, it almost killed me. And there's a saying we say in the film industry, I've been working in the film industry for 12 years and I've been trying to get out of it ever since. And that was true of me. I came back to Vancouver after shooting that film and I was decompressing, and the phone rang. And as it turned out, there was a movie shooting in town, and a producer called in a panic because they needed somebody to supervise the motion capture shoot for this movie. That was the first time I'd ever heard these 2 words in one sentence. And since I was so desperate to get into something new and to get a new job, I sat down and went for the interview. And she told me that I would have to survey and map out sets. I would have to map the live action performances so that we could match up the robots to the actors. And I had to build motion capture proxies and props and schedule and supervise all the motion capture for the movie for locked scenes. Way, way over my head. I had never opened Maya. I didn't know what Motion Builder was. I didn't know what 3D animation really was. But I really, really needed a change. And so I accepted the job. And I learned right away that I was in desperate need of a mentor. And as it turned out, I was about to win the mentor lottery. Cut to me driving from LAX to Venice Beach, California, to meet Andy Jones, the animation director on iRobot. You might have seen some of his films, Final Fantasy. He did a short in the Animatrix, and eventually he was nominated and won the Oscar for Avatar. Andy showed me everything that I needed to know about motion capture and introduced me to the animators and to the pipeline that we were using. So as it turned out, everything went super well. The movie turned out great. I met somebody from New Line that was doing a co-production with a game studio called Electronic Arts. It was their office in San Francisco. And they needed someone to direct 200 to 250 scenes in the Lord of the Rings RPG called The Third Age, which happened to be my favorite genre, my favorite books, and my favorite movies of all time. So I literally was about to live the dream. I'll look back at this game as probably one of the best experiences of my entire life. And it was my foray into gaming. But I learned something right away, that games are hard. And the analogy I like to use is that on a film or TV set, we march everything in front of the camera. And we put it into focus, and we put lights on it. Actors wear wardrobe, costumes, hair, makeup. There's sets. Everything is there. We capture it, and we edit it later. And in a way, games are kind of the opposite for me. It seems like, I don't know if you've ever seen those car commercials where they're selling a vehicle, and it's going around a corner, and they explode the car into like 3 million little pieces so that you know it's just incredible engineering. But you see all the parts floating around. And to me, that's what it's like making a game all the way through production, except you're juggling the parts back and forth, customizing them, changing them right up to the last minute, and it almost feels like the console is the camera, and it's projecting it onto your television based on player choice and all kinds of other factors. What I learned very quickly was that it's extremely complicated making movies and video games and making games. I spent 8 years at Electronic Arts in Vancouver, and I worked on over 15 titles of all different kinds of genres, and I got lots of really, really great experience. directing talent, and learning how runtime cinematics work and how rendered cinematics work in games. And one day the phone rang, and it was Maxime Béland, and he was curious if I wanted to come to Toronto to work on Splinter Cell Blacklist and help start up a new studio. So I moved my family to Toronto, and I've been there ever since. And I'm working on Splinter Cell Blacklist, which is still very much in production right now. We're shipping in the spring of 2013, and so my entire team is back in Toronto. Hopefully they'll be watching this. They're working tirelessly to try to bring everything together for you. I'll be showing you a little bit about our pipeline, our technology, our studio, and how it makes what we're doing unique in terms of gaming. This is our studio. As you can see, there's a lot of wood. It's a really great open space. It's an awesome environment to work. The team we have that Alex and Max put together is a little bit like, I think of it as the New York Yankees. It's deep, and the roster is huge. So many killers on this game. It's unbelievable. We have incredible talent working on the game. In the spring of this year, we completed production on a state-of-the-art motion capture facility. And in that facility, we do performance capture, as well as body capture. It's 55 feet by 33 feet. We have 80 T160 sensor cameras around the volume. We have 6 HMC wireless head-mounted cameras for capturing facial performance. Each one of those has a mic. We have an integrated Pro Tools setup with 2 boom microphones, 4 reference cameras that are hooked up to 2 60-inch screens, a stunt beam across the middle of the volume. Pretty much, this stage has everything I've ever wanted in a volume, all in one place, and 1 minute walk from my desk. And I'm going to explain some of the basics of motion capture so you guys can understand what it really is. You see that all the actors are wearing their underwear, and they have little black balls all over their body. So if I was standing in a motion capture volume right now, and there were cameras around me, all the cameras over here would be looking for where that ball is on my chest. And as I move in time and space, it's tracking how it moves. And it's giving all that information to the computers, and it's saying, hey, I can see the chest marker, it's all good, it's moving in time and space, all good. But the cameras behind me, it's a different story. They're saying, holy crap, I can't see the chest marker, what's going on? He's moving in time and space, but I can't see the marker. Well, as it turns out, all the cameras talk to each other. They're always communicating. This idea of the camera not being able to see the marker behind me, we call occlusion. So the higher the resolution of the cameras and the proximity of the cameras will determine the quality of data and the amount of occlusion. When I first started doing motion capture 10 years ago, the volume was 15 feet by 15 feet. I could only capture 3 or 4 actors at once, and the system usually crashed. Now, we're doing volumes up to, as big as you want, and I'm putting up to 11 actors in the volume, and we're capturing face, body, and voice all at the same time, all synced with time code. A lot of studios are doing this. It's a great way to capture performance and to keep it together. I'll go into a bit more of that later on. What I want to talk a bit about today is a concept that I'm calling actor-driven animation. And it means taking your pipeline and making it actor-focused and using filmic workflows throughout that process. From screenplay to shooting, to editorial, and animation. In a way, it means letting go. You've got storyboards, you've got previs. Go onto the set and just leave it off to the side and see what the actors are going to do. They're all trained artists, and they're going to bring a lot. So it's really important, if you want to do the actor-driven process, is to let go and see what they're going to bring to a scene. The camera is the X-ray machine of all things false. It's a term I like to use. If it's false on the page, it's 10 times more false on camera. And you'll discover this if you're an actor or a director like myself. When you take dialogue and scenes and you put it in front of the camera, it just stands there stark naked in front of you. If it's bad, it's really bad. And it's really important to know this when you're working with screenplays, because it's a different art form, writing screenplays versus writing story. Happy Accidents, I stole that from an art director who I loved working with, and that just means having an open mind when you go onto set and letting the artist collaborate, let things happen. Sometimes happy accidents are the best thing that can happen to a scene. Action over dialogue is a term I use to make our cinematics to make them move, to make them more alive. So instead of having an action moment during gameplay and cutting to a scripted event where actors are just talking to each other, I call that talking heads, what we do is we take action and we lay it over dialogue. We take dialogue and we lay it over action. It makes scenes more dynamic and it makes our characters look better. We're using this philosophy throughout all of our scripted events. It's way harder to shoot, way harder to edit, but it has a much better feeling. I don't know if any of you have seen any of the Aaron Sorkin projects like The Newsroom. It's like swirling actors, really exciting to watch, really fun to shoot. Actor-friendly pipeline just means understanding that actors have needs. And if those needs aren't being met, then you're not going to get good results as a director. And that goes from screenplay to shooting to editorial. For screenplay, it's about working with a screenplay writer to get good, truthful dialogue that somebody can use. It means when actors are on set, they're trained to act to cameras. So give them the cameras right on set that they can act to. Understanding what they go through is a big part of how I think video game cinematics are going to mature. And filmic workflows, which means standing on the shoulders of giants. Film and television pipelines have been around for over 50 years. They work. People use them all over the world. Let's look at those pipelines and see what we can steal from it to make cinematics in games more efficient, more dramatic, and more dynamic. One of the first video games I worked on, I found myself on a set shooting a scene about two streetcar racers, and the one guy got out of the car and walked up to the other guy and said, that pump gas kit car doesn't stand a chance. And when I was in pre-production, I felt a little weird about the line, but not as weird as I felt when I was on set that day watching the actor deliver that line. And I'm not saying it's a bad line, but it was really difficult to say truthfully. And I'll never forget that moment because whenever I get to the part on a project where we're creating the screenplay, it's super important to understand the difference between a story writer and a screenplay writer. Screenplays are boiled down to their absolute essence of storytelling. Every second on screen is like the most precious time there could ever be. So everything needs to be boiled down to its absolute essence in that mode. And the dialogue has to be truthful and it has to be playable. And I've been super lucky on Blacklist. I've been working with Richard Dansky, our Clancy writer, and Matt McLennan, who is a TV writer in Toronto, and Naveed Kavari, our narrative designer. And the three of them I call the triumvirate. It's a really unstoppable team in terms of narrative. We're doing stuff that I've never done before in a project, and I'm super excited. I don't think I ever want to go into another project without that kind of structure. There's a reason that directors work with the same casting directors all of their careers. And it's the synergy they have, and it's also the fact that if you don't have the right cast, there's no sense in moving forward. I've tried it, it doesn't work. If you don't have the right cast, you can't get to the next stage, especially when you're working with ensemble pieces, where you have actors that play off each other. There's an art form to getting talent for projects. And we have to understand that there are people that work their whole lives assembling casts for TV and film projects, and we can use them when we're assembling our game projects. So I've been working with talent directors right from the beginning, and I've been getting really great results. The read-through at this stage is more about the screenplay, because even if I haven't had time or I haven't found all the right cast, I'm still going to bring people in to do the read-through. And the read-through is a chance to find the voices of the characters. And I think that if ever I end up on stage shooting a scene and I haven't done a read-through and I haven't done a rehearsal, then it's actually a terrifying moment before that actor speaks, because I have no idea what they're going to sound like and how they're going to interpret the character, for me and for the actor. So this part of the pipeline is essential. Read-throughs will inform the kind of dialogue that you're writing. It will inform the way the actors are approaching their voices, and inevitably it leads to rewrites. If you haven't done 9 or 10, 15, 20 rewrites on a scene, then it's not done. Writing screenplays is really hard. The first draft always sucks. You have to go at it and at it. It takes time to find structure and form in a screenplay. Rehearsals. What I've noticed is as soon as you start running out of money on any sort of project, The first thing that people want to cut are the rehearsals, and I think that's a huge mistake. Once you have the screenplay, once we have everything down pat, it's time to go into the volume and rehearse the scenes, find the choreography, find the life of the scene. And it's even more important when you're doing performance capture because the actors don't have anything they would normally have on a stage. Like they don't have the wardrobe, they don't have the sets, they don't have the set decoration. Some cases they don't even have the other actors to work with. It's a very hostile environment and it doesn't provide for what the actors' needs are. So by bringing people in on rehearsals, even for small, unimportant scenes, it's super important that you get the muscle memory and try it at least once. It'll surprise you. Because on a TV set that's working through lots of scenes with a really experienced cast, they're shooting 8, 9, 10 pages of script every day. And when you've prepared your game script properly, it's possible to get up to 12, 13 pages a day if you have the right cast, and it's really quality stuff that you're doing. Choreography, I put a picture up of a football play because this is pretty much what goes through my head every time I get ready to block a scene. So blocking is choreography. It's how actors move relative to the camera. The strange thing about high-fidelity CG and the uncanny valley is that the more you move characters, the more lifelike and the more desirable they look across all scenes. So the first thing I do when I sit down to direct a scene is I ask myself, how can the actors move? What can they touch? What props can they use in this scene? Is there a truthful reason for this actor to walk over to this screen and turn around? Is there a reason that I would turn away from you and put my back to you? Is there a reason that I would want this scene to be a walk and talk? All of those questions need to be asked, and we need to keep everybody moving, and the big reason is that it makes for really, really good cameras. I use cameras in several ways, but two major ways when I'm on set. So when I first started doing motion capture, all the cameras were at the edge of the volume, not really inside the volume. And what I found is as a director, as I started doing performance capture, I found it really, really hard to know if I had the right performance. There's a lot of pressure, it's really difficult. You're watching 2 or 3 actors at a time. It's really hard to know whether you got the right performance. It's totally nerve-wracking. By bringing the cameras into the volume and making them into cinematic cameras, even though they're not going to be your final cameras, it gives a lot. It helps me validate what the performance looks like to a certain perspective. It also helps the actors. They're trained to act to camera, not in empty spaces, so it gives them something. It also provides the raw material for our edit, which I'll get to later on. And playback. You think this would go without saying, but it doesn't. At the beginning of my career, playback was a computer monitor over at the side of the stage. I had to run over after a scene, I had to click on a file. It would be a Windows encoded file. And it would be a really wide shot, and the actor would be like this big, and I'd be looking at it with headphones, trying to figure out whether I had the scene. And it's actually impossible to know whether you have it or not when you look at scenes like that. If you're doing performance capture, you need playback. We use a 60-inch screen with 4 feeds. I can blow up any feed I want at any time, so I watch that during the performances, and then I can go back through and play back and look for emotional beats, eye line, and story points. It's crucial for performance capture because you want to get it all there on stage. It also allows you to treat animation like coverage. On a film set, if you're shooting an 8-page scene, it'll often take the entire day or 3/4 of the day to shoot it. In the morning, the actors show up, they're kind of groggy. They shoot the master and they're warming up, and then just before noon, they're getting into overs and close-ups, and the scene evolves from morning till 3 o'clock. It ends up being so many different things, and there's happy accidents, and there's things that happen that that weren't expected, but they're all things that happen when you're building a scene. In performance capture, I'm able to capture it all at once, which is a blessing and it's also a curse because you're not getting to run through the scene that many times. You're not getting all those happy accidents. So what I like to do is, using reference cameras, I like to run the scene once, I get the master, once I feel like I have that, then I'll go in for coverage with the reference cameras, and I'll only do portions of the cinematics. I'll get emotional beats, I'll get eye lines, I'll get people walking into close-ups. All of those beats, I'll shoot them as just little pieces, and it all goes together and gets sent up to editorial, to what I call, this is the cornerstone of our filmic pipeline. So we shoot our scenes, we choose the best prints. I'm like, okay, I love take 5, I love take 7, I love take 10. These are great takes. But I take all the takes upstairs. Everything goes to a professional editor that works in Final Cut Pro, somebody preferably from film or TV that cuts through scenes really quick. And we take it and we cut together all the scenes on a timeline. And I cut them down to their essence. We find tempo, we find character, we find emotional beats. Then I'll bring producers and producers and creative directors and stakeholders into the room, and I'll get the scene approved with a bit of music, some sound effects, to try to create the feeling of what we want the scene to be. Because of our pipeline, I'm able to solve a lot more variety than I was 10 years ago, when I would walk out of the volume and they'd say, what do you want, A or B? Or I could choose a hero take and maybe another take, but I would just bring them in their entirety. Now I'm able to bring 10 takes if I want, and each take chosen just for that aspect of the performance that I want. I take those, we cut it together, and we order data from that. Up till then, we haven't ordered a single piece of data. This data gets ordered out, frame accurate, so that, here, I'll show you the editing room. So, for instance, for this section of the timeline, I might order take 5, and I only need 30 frames from take 5. So when I order the data, I just say, give me 30 frames from take 5, and then when it all comes back, it goes into a 3D application, it all gets stacked up in a timeline, and that timeline matches the editorial timeline perfectly, which also matches the video reference camera timeline, which also matches the facial camera timeline, which also matches the voice. I have like a vertical slice of the performance all the way through, that's what I think is a real game changer in terms of having a filmic workflow for animation. And then it's time to have fun and operate cameras, which we do in several ways. I use a tool called Craft Studio Director and a plugin for Motion Builder, which we've been in development with them for the past couple of years. Essentially, a camera artist can operate a camera with an Xbox 360 controller. That's not new. I think we've been doing that for quite a while. But I think what's new is we're giving the camera, we're giving it weight, we're giving it filters that create the organicness of a camera. You know, when you operate and somebody's walking, you'll overpan and you'll come back into the close-up. Those are the things that make cameras feel natural. So the Craft tool lets us operate cameras with the controller and add all that naturalness to the cameras. We also use Motion Builder, keyed cameras, but most interesting for me is the virtual camera, and we're using it more and more on Blacklist, and it's a super exciting way to author cameras in a scene. So I'll shoot the scene, I'll get all the performances I want, all the best of the best of the best, I'll assemble it into a timeline, and then we take that timeline, we put it into a 3D application, and I drop in the environment. With some rough lighting, I'll send it down to the motion capture stage. And all of you have seen Star Trek. You guys have heard of the holodeck. You know, you walk into the holodeck and everything draws around you and it's magical and amazing. Well, Randy's 10-inch LCD screen is his window to the holodeck. The only difference is, in the holodeck, you have your scene, and all the actors are waiting patiently on their start marks. You hit a button on the virtual camera, and then you start shooting the scene. You shoot it over and over and over again, and you create what I call coverage. So it's kind of profound to use this tool, because as a director working on a set, it's kind of like when you get a great scene and it all comes together, it's a little bit like planets aligning. The planets line up every day with this system. It's always there. They're always on the start mark. You always get to try again. You could go to film school for a year and you won't learn as much as you could learn in our virtual volume in terms of camera language, axis, all that stuff we're doing, and it's absolutely mind-blowing. It's changing the way we shoot. It's making our scenes more organic, more visceral. All of that, all the cameras, the Motion Builder, the Craft cameras, the virtual cameras, they all come together and they go back to the edit suite, the same timeline, and now we get serious. Producers are like, Footy, you got to stop. I need you to lock down the scene. We got to get it in the game. So we using the cinematic cameras, we lock down the scenes, and we get what is going to be reflective of the final scene in game. That's when the real work starts. We work with our HMC camera data, which is a video of the facial performance. We create sols from that, and we apply that to our characters, and then we start keying on top. for a long and painful process called facial animation, which is where the life of our characters live. And we work really, really, really hard to get great results for our characters. Right now I'm in the middle of that for the game that we're producing, and it's really exciting, but it's a lot of hard work, and it takes a lot of talented animators. The filmic workflows that I'm talking about, there's been a lot of talk over the past 5 years about convergence, movies and games converging. And I think that it's important to say that games, like movies, tell stories, but we're interactive. And as I said earlier, making movies and games is extremely complicated. There are so many dependencies that it's even hard to begin to describe, what you're up against when you're trying to put it in game. And using some of the filmic workflows to streamline our process is going to really help in terms of getting better expected results. We're not the only studio doing it. I'm seeing it across all games now, made all over the world. There's some incredible cinematics. This pipeline is the first time that I've ever had it all in one place with my own performance capture studio. And it's actually, we're getting incredible results. I'm so sad that I can share hardly anything with you today from our scenes, but we'll be coming out with assets as soon as they're ready. What I'm going to show you is our Blacklist trailer that came out on September 25th. And yeah, I'll just let that speak for itself.
Peggy 18.
So what's your story? You're a mystery. Who are you? Man is gonna kill you.
Hundreds dead in Guam, a countdown to more attacks targeting America. The world is looking for answers, Mr. Fisher, and I don't have any. The private sector can't give you the freedom to do what you need. As Commander-in-Chief, I can.
You mean the fifth freedom?
Completely off the books, no prosecution.
I'll tell you anything you want to know, anything!
We have 3 days until the next Blacklist attack.
I'll need cover from up top.
Few presidents have ever granted the fifth freedom. It's the right to defend our laws.
Take the shot, Grim.
By breaking them. To safeguard secrets. By stealing them. To save lives. By taking them.
Jadid, where?
You think you can stop the Blacklist?
To do whatever it takes to protect our country. The fifth freedom is mine alone. I am Sam Fisher. I am a Splinter Cell.
I want to talk to the man in charge.
You're talking to him.
Hello. So we've got a few more minutes left, and we're going to do some Q&A now with David. If you want to hop back up, David.
Sure.
And let's bring the house lights up at the back as well. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to tell who's raising their hand. I see it happening, sort of. There we go. Right. People with hands up. Excellent. Okay, someone with a microphone is now going to find you. When you're called upon to ask your question, if you could just stand up and then ask your question and sit down again, that'd be brilliant. Right, so we're in the centre here first. Yes.
Hi. A lot of games now, as you sort of mentioned, are taking more advantage of cinematics and better rendering and everything else. But how do you work with the in-game animators? Because I've played a lot of games that have got great cinematics, and there's one character, and then you go in a game, and it's almost like they move differently, they become a different character. There's certain duality. So how do you work closely together?
Yeah, I think for this title, for Blacklist, this would be the most cinematics that I've ever done on a game. And I keep saying that every time I go to a new game, I'm hitting a new level. But some of the cinematics are for cutscenes, but a lot of them are what I call gameplay animations that take place during gameplay. There's a big push towards getting really high quality performances during gameplay. So it isn't like, while you're playing the game, there's not like these stickmen walking around talking, and then you cut to a cinematic and all of a sudden everyone has a million polys and they look gorgeous. So we're doing that already, and I think it's a function of compression and the fact that we're all fighting for frame rate. So I think what it takes is a real commitment when you begin production to involve cinematics in those gameplay animations, which get triggered while you're playing the game, that have most of the fidelity of the cinematics that we shoot, and they have a little bit of facial. They'll have truthful dialogue that'll kind of immerse you in the story. I think you're going to see more and more and more of that. But as always, like as we get more memory and as we get more powerful consoles, we're really going to be able to start exploring that during gameplay, more so than just in cinematics. And Blacklist, all of our cinematics are runtime, so it wouldn't be a huge leap to be able to do that.
Okay, for the next question, we're going to the front, and then I think we're going to the back at the right.
Okay, so I want to know about cutscene length. Is it going to be more like what we've seen in previous Splinter Cell games, or more like what we see in the Metal Gear franchise, whether they're very lengthy cutscenes or a lot of shorter cutscenes?
Yeah, so the design right now is for them to be short and have blends in and out of gameplay so that it's really experiential. I think that we have to be super careful with scripted events, because we don't want to be telling loads and loads of exposition. We don't want to be creating a payoff for the player. They really need to be about change, reversals. They need to be about what I like to call the gap between what you expected and what you actually received. So I think in Blacklist, we've been very respectful about knowing when we're in a cinematic why we're there. We're there to create an emotional wrapper around gameplay that's just about to happen, or progress some story somewhere else. And I mean, it's been like that for a lot of games that I've worked on. I think more and more, every time I'm doing a cinematic, first question I ask myself is, why aren't we doing this in gameplay? And if I can do it in gameplay, then we do.
Okay, the next question is towards the back at the right, and that's right. If you keep your hands up, then people will find you with microphones.
I have two very quick questions. First of all, in the trailer, correct me if I'm wrong, but I noticed that the voice actor was different. To me, the voice of Sam Fisher is as iconic as, for example, Master Chief in Halo. Is it a different voice actor, and if so, why did you choose to come to that decision?
Yeah, I can answer that. So all the other Splinter Cells, we were working with Michael Ironside. He was the voice of Sam Fisher. And so the big change is, for the story we wanted to tell and the kind of technology that we're using in gaming right now, it made perfect sense for us to go with new talent, mostly because actors don't like karaoke acting, and that's what I'll call it. So, for instance, on Conviction, Michael Ironside was putting his voice to animation that he wasn't actually doing. And there was a lot of frustration in that. No actor likes to put their voice to somebody else's body movement. It's like, why is he moving like that? Why is he doing that? I wouldn't be doing that. And when you're capturing performances like that, face, body, and voice separately, it's not a great way of getting truthful performances. It takes a long time, and it's really hard. And the kind of cutscenes we wanted to do in Blacklist was, the philosophy was action over dialogue, action over dialogue. So we wanted the scenes to move. We didn't really want talking heads. So we needed our talent to be able to do elite things, fall from heights, tuck and roll, shoot, all the things that you'd expect out of a stunt player. So when you add up all those things, we really had no choice but to make the decision we did for the type of story that we wanted to tell.
Okay, and very quickly, what military training did the actors receive? Because obviously it's a military-themed game. In order to recreate that accuracy, what kind of training?
Yeah. Well, we're working with a guy named Kevin Secours, and he's the kind of guy that can kill you with an eraser, if you know what I mean. Really dangerous guy. We've been working with him since the beginning. The animation team actually found him. We pounced on him right away. He's been at every single one of our shoots and has been the catalyst behind many decisions that we make in terms of how Sam Fisher enters a room, how Sam Fisher uses his weapons, how Sam Fisher does his takedowns. It's unbelievable, this guy. He is unbelievable in terms of elite. He does consulting work for military for all different countries around the world. And we've been working with him to make sure that all our actions are authentic. And as you see more and more, you're going to see some incredible moves as we start showing more assets. Thanks.
Cool. We have time for one more question, and it's this chap here in the middle of the right.
Yeah, hi. My question was quite similar with Michael Ironside. And obviously, you can't speak for other games, but there are other technologies I've seen that don't require so much immersion from one character. Obviously, like L.A. Noire has a very facially orientated scene.
Yeah.
I just wondered if you could talk about kind of the more specific reasons for what you focus on. Obviously, the body movements seem great.
Yeah.
But obviously, while looking at it, there are other games that have a slightly different approach and different immersive aspect. I mean, is it more to the point where it's a film and we need to see the actors moving, or is it, I want to connect with this character, I want to see his face, I want to understand what he's saying, even if I'm not looking at, like, hearing his voice, you know what I mean?
I think it comes down to like what you consider a holistic performance. And speaking of L.A. Noire, I worked with a similar technology when I was at Black Box in Vancouver, and back then we called it universal capture. And I think it's really similar technology. So there's cameras in a very brightly lit room, extremely bright, and the actors deliver all their performances looking forward to the cameras, and they get mapped onto the performers. I can tell you, I was watching some of the making of, and it is really, really hard work for the actors. And it's super hard work as an animator when you're taking those facial performances and you're trying to map it out to body motion. So I think the point is that if you want to get a holistic performance, and we communicate with our eyes, we communicate with our voice, we communicate with our posing and our stance, it all goes together. And I think that the one thing that you'll know, especially when you start watching photoreal movies, when things don't seem just quite right, it takes very little to throw off a performance. And when you're assembling it from all these different pieces, it's extremely challenging and time-consuming. And I think they did a really great job in L.A. Noire, but having done it already, with the pipeline, with the kind of story we wanted to tell, with the amount of action that we wanted to put into our stories, it didn't really make sense for us to look at that pipeline, even though the quality of the facial is probably as good as you're going to get with those systems. But it's just about you have to make a right decision for the entire performance, and when it's action-oriented, like it is in Blacklist, I feel like we made the right choice for our system anyway, and with Eric Johnson, who's playing Sam Fisher. Great.
Cool. I'm afraid that's all we've got time for, so thank you very much, everyone, and thank you again to David.
Thank you.